He brought the envelope here on purpose, but now he's panicking. What changed so suddenly that even he looks scared now?
My father tapped his champagne glass and said, "Before this celebration continues, everyone deserves to know Elizabeth is not our child." The entire ballroom went dead silent. I was standing beside my parents at my brother Caleb's engagement party, surrounded by relatives, coworkers, family friends, over 100 people staring at me under those bright hotel lights. My mother wouldn't even look at me. She just sat there gripping her napkin so hard her hands were shaking. Then my father looked straight at me and said, "You've lived off this family long enough." People started whispering immediately. Someone near the back actually pulled out their phone to record. Caleb stepped forward like he was about to stop him, but my father raised his voice over everyone. "She is not a Mercer. And after tonight, she is no longer welcome in this family." I could feel every single person watching me as my mother suddenly stood up and said, "Richard, don't!" But he pointed at the ballroom doors and shouted, "Walk out now or I'll tell them the rest." Nobody moved. Not my aunts sitting near the stage, not the business partners from Mercer Development lined up beside the bar, not even Caleb's fiancée Vanessa, who still stood frozen with one hand covering her mouth. I could actually hear the air conditioner humming over the silence. I stared at my father, waiting for him to laugh, to say it was some disgusting joke, something cruel and inappropriate he'd regret in 5 seconds. But Richard Mercer didn't joke when he wanted control. His face was completely calm. Cold. Calculated. "I think that's enough," Caleb said, stepping between us. "Dad, stop!" "Sit down," my father snapped without even looking at him. Caleb didn't move. That's when I noticed something I'd never seen before. My brother looked scared of him. Not annoyed, not embarrassed. Terrified. I turned toward my mother again. "Mom, what is he talking about?" Her eyes filled instantly. That should have been my answer right there. Because if this was a lie, she would have denied it immediately. Instead, she whispered, "Lizzie," and then stopped. My chest tightened so hard I could barely breathe. Around the ballroom, whispers started spreading table to table like fire. "She's adopted?" "No," he said, "not their child. I heard rumors years ago. Wait, so who is she?" My father raised his glass again like he was finishing a business announcement instead of destroying me in front of everyone I'd ever known. "For years," he said smoothly, "my wife and I have provided Elizabeth with a home, an education, employment, and support despite difficult circumstances." Difficult circumstances? I almost laughed. I'd spent 4 years working 12-hour days in his company office after putting college on hold because he said the family needed me. I handled payroll, scheduling, client calls. I took care of my grandmother while Caleb was away at school. And now he was talking about me like I was some stray he picked up out of pity. "You told me I was family," I said quietly. "I told you what was necessary." The room reacted to that. Audible gasps. Someone muttered, "Jesus Christ!" Caleb grabbed my father's arm. "You are not doing this here." Richard yanked his arm away violently enough that glasses rattled on the head table. "She deserves the truth," he said. "No," Caleb shot back. "You're trying to save yourself." My father's expression changed for half a second. Just enough for me to notice. "Save yourself?" Before I could process it, one of my aunts suddenly stood up from a nearby table. "Richard," she said nervously, "maybe this should wait until after the engagement party." "No," he replied sharply. "It should have been handled years ago." My stomach dropped. Years ago. Not tonight. Not a joke. Not anger. Something planned. I looked around the ballroom again, and that's when I noticed an older woman near the back exit, staring directly at me. Gray coat, dark hair, maybe late 50s. She looked horrified. Not surprised. Like she already knew what was happening. The second our eyes met, she turned and disappeared into the hallway. I instinctively started after her. But my father's voice stopped me cold. "If you walk out that door," he said, loud enough for the entire ballroom to hear, "don't expect to come back when you learn what your real mother did to you." I stopped so suddenly my heels scraped against the ballroom floor. Real mother. The words hit harder than everything else combined. Behind me, conversations exploded all at once. People weren't even pretending not to stare anymore. My father had turned my entire life into public entertainment. I slowly faced him again. "What did you just say?" But before he could answer, Caleb stepped directly between us. "Liz, don't listen to him right now," he said quickly. "Just leave with me." "No, my father cut in. She's wanted answers her whole life. Haven't you, Elizabeth?" My throat tightened, because he was right. I had spent years pretending not to notice the things that didn't make sense. Why every childhood photo before age 6 had mysteriously disappeared. Why my mother cried after parent-teacher conferences. Why my father refused to help with a school ancestry project when I was 13 and grounded me for asking questions afterward. Even growing up, something always felt off. Caleb got warmth, I got rules. Caleb got celebrated, I got tolerated. And somehow I'd convinced myself that if I worked hard enough, my father would finally look at me the way he looked at his real son. "You don't get to do this publicly," Caleb hissed at him. Richard ignored him completely. "She overheard enough already," he said. "Might as well finish it." A chill ran through me instantly. Overheard what? My mind flashed back 2 weeks earlier. I'd stayed late at the office, finishing invoices, when I heard shouting inside my parents' conference room. My mother was crying. "She deserves the truth," she kept saying. And my father answered with something that made no sense at the time. "If she finds out now, everything falls apart." At the party, my mother suddenly stood from her chair so fast it tipped backward onto the floor. "Richard, please," she whispered. "Not like this." That's when Caleb turned toward me, panic written all over his face. "Liz," he said carefully, "Dad lied tonight, but you don't understand why." Before I could ask what that meant, my father reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a sealed manila envelope with my name written across the front. Every sound in the ballroom disappeared. My eyes locked onto that envelope like it was something dangerous. My father held it between 2 fingers, but didn't hand it to me immediately. He wanted everyone watching, wanted control of the moment. Caleb saw it too and went pale. "Dad," he said sharply, "don't." Richard ignored him. "This," he announced to the room, "contains documents Elizabeth has apparently been curious about for years." I felt heat rising into my face. "Why are you doing this to me?" His expression never changed. "Because hiding the truth has already caused enough damage." Damage! He kept speaking like I was some problem the family had been forced to manage. My mother suddenly rushed toward him. "Richard, stop!" But he stepped away before she could grab the envelope. That's when I noticed people recording openly now. Phones raised, whispers everywhere. The humiliation wasn't temporary anymore. This was going to spread to the company, to our relatives, to everyone. Caleb lowered his voice and moved closer to me. "Liz, don't open anything he gives you here." "Why?" He hesitated too long, and that terrified me more than anything else. Across the ballroom, one of my father's business partners quietly escorted his wife away from our table like we were radioactive. Richard finally held the envelope out toward me. "You've spent your whole life asking where you came from," he said. "Go ahead." My hands shook as I took it. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Inside, I found 3 things. A hospital bracelet, a faded photograph of a newborn baby wrapped in pink blankets, and a photocopied legal document. I stared at the name printed across the top. Not Mercer. Vance! My pulse started pounding in my ears. What is this? I whispered. My mother broke down instantly. Caleb closed his eyes like he already knew, and then my father said the one sentence that made the entire room erupt again. You were never legally ours. The room exploded into noise. Gasps. Chairs scraping across the ballroom floor. I couldn't hear any single voice clearly anymore, because my heart was pounding too hard. I stared at the paper in my hands again. Vance. The name felt unfamiliar and terrifying at the same time. This isn't real, I said weakly. But nobody answered me. Not my mother. Not Caleb. Not even my father. And that silence told me more than words could. Caleb grabbed my arm carefully. Liz, we need to leave, right now! I pulled away from him. You knew? His face crumpled immediately. Not all of it. How long? A couple months, he admitted quietly. The betrayal hit almost as hard as my father's announcement. You let me stand here tonight not knowing any of this? I was trying to protect you. By lying to me? Before Caleb could answer, my father raised his voice again. She's emotional because she doesn't understand the circumstances. I turned on him instantly, then explained them. For the first time all night, he hesitated. Just for a second. And Caleb noticed too. That tiny pause changed everything. Because suddenly this didn't feel like a man exposing the truth. It felt like a man trying to control it before someone else could. Caleb stepped in front of me again. Dad, enough! Richard's jaw tightened. You have no idea what's at stake. There it is, Caleb snapped. That's what this is really about. The ballroom went quiet again. My father's eyes darkened. Careful. But Caleb looked done being afraid. 2 weeks earlier, I'd overheard my parents arguing about DNA results. At the time, I thought maybe someone had cheated. Now I realized it was about me. About whatever secret had been buried for 22 years. My mother suddenly grabbed my wrist with shaking hands. Lizzie. She whispered desperately, if anyone contacts you tonight, don't talk to them before speaking to me first. Anyone? Before I could ask what she meant, one of the hotel staff hurried into the ballroom and walked directly toward my father. He leaned down and whispered something into Richard Mercer's ear. And for the first time in my entire life, I saw my father look genuinely afraid.
He planned this entire humiliation so carefully. So who just showed up downstairs that made him suddenly lose control like that?
My father turned so pale it looked like all the blood had drained out of him. What? Caleb demanded. Richard ignored him completely. Where is she? The hotel employee glanced nervously toward the ballroom entrance. Lobby. Before anyone could stop him, my father shoved past our table and stormed out of the room, and almost everyone followed, including me. The second I reached the hotel lobby, I understood why he panicked. The older woman from the ballroom stood near the front doors, clutching a leather purse against her chest. 2 police officers stood beside her. And the moment she saw me, she started crying. Not politely, not quietly. The kind of crying that comes from years of holding something in too long. Oh my God, she whispered. That's her. I froze. One of the officers looked toward me carefully. Elizabette Mercer? The older woman shook her head immediately through tears. No, she said. Her name was supposed to be Elizabeth Vance. My father stormed forward. You don't get to come in here after 22 years and start making accusations. The woman looked straight at him. You stole my daughter. The entire lobby went silent. Even the officers looked tense. My mother finally broke. She collapsed into one of the hotel chairs, sobbing while Caleb stood beside her. Stunned. And suddenly all the strange pieces of my life started crashing together at once. The missing photos, the secrecy, the arguments, the DNA test, the fear. The woman introduced herself as Angela Vance. And according to her, I had been taken from her as a newborn. At first it sounded impossible. Insane. But then the officers explained they'd reopened an old investigation months earlier after a retired nurse came forward with information about falsified hospital records from 2004. Richard Mercer's name had surfaced repeatedly. My stomach twisted so violently, I thought I might faint. Angela explained everything through tears. After a traumatic childbirth, she'd been told her baby died unexpectedly during the night. But inconsistencies in paperwork and missing records haunted her for years. Eventually, she discovered hospital staff had accepted illegal payments connected to private adoptions. One of those payments traced back to my father. I looked at my mother. She couldn't even meet my eyes. I didn't know at first, she whispered brokenly. Richard told me the adoption had been rushed, but legal. I found out years later. And you stayed? I asked. Fresh tears rolled down her face. He said if I told anyone, he'd destroy all of us. My father suddenly snapped. Don't act innocent now. But nobody was listening to him anymore. Not the police, not the guests, not even Caleb. The officers asked Richard Mercer to come with them for questioning, and for the first time in my life, I watched my father lose complete control of a room. People who admired him an hour earlier now stared at him like a stranger. Phones recorded everything. Whispers spread everywhere. Kidnapping. Fraud. Stolen child. As police escorted him outside, he turned toward me one last time. And somehow he still sounded angry at me. I gave you everything. I stared at him for a long moment before answering. No, I said quietly. You gave me a life built on a lie. By morning, clips from the engagement party and hotel lobby were everywhere online. Mercer Development went under investigation within days. Relatives started calling me nonstop with apologies they should have made years ago. My mother moved out before Richard was formally charged. Caleb kept trying to repair whatever was left of our family, but none of us even knew what family meant anymore. And me? I walked away from the Mercer name forever. Months later, I stood beside Angela on a quiet beach at sunrise after legally changing my name to Elizabeth Vance. The wind carried the sound of waves across the shore while my phone buzzed again with another news alert about Richard Mercer's trial. This time, I muted it without reading. Because for the first time in my life, I finally knew who I was.
If one family could hide something this massive for 22 years using money, reputation, and silence, how many other people are still living inside identities that were never actually theirs?